This is Songwriters Room, and I'm your host, Tomoko. Today's guest is Kevin Pescoran. Kevin is a game music producer and songwriter with the music alias Quadraxis. He is from San Francisco, California, and Peruvian descent. At the tender age of 27, he already owns an independent record label, Estética Cibernética. Did I say it right?
Correct.
Okay. Which signs artists from all over the globe to create futuristic music, often inspired by cyberpunk culture. He's also produced an original album, including some of Japan's greatest game composers, to magnify the creativity and diversity of styles found in game music. You can check out his releases at esteticacibernetica.com.
Mm-hmm.
So, all the game music lovers, can I get a whoop whoop?
Whoop, whoop.
Ladies and gents, please welcome Kevin Pescoran.
Hola, ¿cómo están?
Muy bien.
Awesome.
I'm from Osaka. Osaka dialect is very close to Spanish, and you say "hola," right?
Mm-hmm.
And Osaka band slang, we say "ora."
Really?
Ora, like kind of like a Yakuza mafia style, like what the fuck you doing kind of thing.
I'll start using that.
So you are so cyberpunk. I love your pink hair.
Thank you. I like it too.
Thank you for showing up today. I know you are more like being more behind the scenes and remain mysterious, right?
Yeah.
But it's so nice to see you in person, because the truth is that I got to know you because you hired me as a translator many times to help your communication with the Japanese game music producers.
Correct. I believe we first met online in 2014, I think.
Right. How did you find me?
I don't remember. It was one of the sites that offered services, and you were on there. And you
maybe
just seemed...
maybe Guru.
Yeah, I think that was it. Yeah.
So it's really nice to see you in person. Since I don't play video games, well, actually, there's this one little game app on my phone that I got addicted recently called Candy Crush. But I had this notion about game music that it's all electric and mechanic. But when I listened to your CD, I was pleasantly surprised that I was totally wrong. There's some jazz in there, little funk and pop and all kinds of music. So I really like it.
That's good to hear. That's what I like about game music, is there's a lot of variety.
I didn't know, see? But obviously, you are a fan of many Japanese game music producers. So is Japan #1 in the world, or what fascinates you most about Japanese game music, and how different from American game music?
It's extremely different. I don't really listen to a lot of American game music. The UK has its own scene too, but I personally like Japanese the most because the composers, when they first started doing it in the 80s, they grew up with jazz, funk, and rock from the 60s, 50s, 70s. So they put that into the video games. So a lot of the more famous video games like Super Mario Brothers have a lot of Latin influence, or rock, classical. And yeah, I just feel like the Japanese composers were just putting whatever they liked into the games. Like one of the games I like that came out in the late 80s has reggae. And the game has nothing to do with reggae, but the composer liked that, so he just threw it in there. Game music to me is, I would say, my favorite genre. I don't know if it's a genre or not, but whenever people say, what do you listen to? I say game music, because it includes everything from classical to heavy metal to jazz. So I just say game music.
I was trying to understand what cyberpunk means, and it's a combination of cybernetics, which is the science of replacing human functions with computerized ones, and of course punk, which is the raucous music and nihilistic sensibility that became a youth culture I'm just reading it, in the 70s and 80s. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's actually accurate.
Okay. What are the songs or names of the producers that influenced you most?
Aside from video game music, which is the majority of it, a lot of European electronic projects like the genre drum and bass and neurofunk. So I listen to groups like Black Sun Empire, Noisia, Belane, and they're still going on today, but they've been around, some of them for like 20 years, 20 plus years. And they play with a lot of synthesizers and experiment, and I just like that stuff. It's a little darker, there's rarely singing. So yeah.
Tell me about those Japanese game producers that I helped to translate and communicate it. Are they your idols?
Yeah, some of them were direct idols from when I was like 5 years old. I grew up listening to their music. I can't say some of their names because they had to use aliases because their companies are very strict. For one of them, I grew up listening to one of his soundtracks in 2003 or 4. And I would pause the game and just listen to the music because it was like rock and electronic. And so when I contacted him like 10 years later and you helped me talk to him, I told him that he was the reason I wanted to make music. And I think you remember that you translated that message for me. And he said it touched him. So the composers I chose were very close to me. I didn't just get who was popular, who was famous, and names you would recognize. Some of them were very obscure. I remember someone reviewed the album and they said it's odd that they would get that guy. That guy's barely done anything. But to me, that guy is very special. So
you're in a different generation. So you're already listening to game music when you were 5.
Yeah, basically since birth. But I can remember stuff when I was 5. My brothers gave me a video game soundtrack, Fighter, the fighting game. They just gave it to me and I just never stopped since then. I still have it. I have it right behind me. That was the first video game soundtrack I ever got. And that soundtrack in particular has rock, a little bit of classical. It has salsa. It has a little bit of Jamaican in it. So just listening to that one game was like listening to the whole world. So that's why I like game music.
Okay. So all the songs that you have in your CDs, those songs are catered for particular games?
Most of the time, yes. It's the composer's job to look at the game and say, what is this? Racing, fighting, shooting? And they have to make something appropriate. But in the case of Japan, they make something appropriate and they implement what they grew up with. So sometimes one of the more famous video games is Final Fantasy, and it's a story-driven game about adventure and, you know, kings and armies.
I even know that one.
You do know that one. Okay. Yeah, that one's one of the more famous ones. But the composer who did most of the series, he grew up with a lot of classic rock like Deep Purple and the Beatles. He said in an interview, him and the composer of Super Mario Brothers, they both said they liked Deep Purple. So when I was a kid, I was like, who's Deep Purple? And then I've become a fan ever since. And it was because of them too.
Yeah, I remember it was huge in Japan.
Final Fantasy or
no,
Deep Purple?
Deep Purple.
I think Japan was the biggest audience they've ever had, even to this day. Every time I YouTube Deep Purple, the subtitles are always in Japanese, always. I wanted to eventually start making editorials in the near future, like YouTube videos to show the influence that these composers had. Because it's not just that they sound similar to Beethoven and Bach and Deep Purple. Sometimes they just lift the music and put it in a video game. And I don't really see that as plagiarizing because it's like 5 seconds of a song or 10 seconds out of like a 2-minute song. But if you listen to classic rock and then you listen to video game music, it's so obvious where the melodies, the sound came from. And I wanted to emphasize on that because a lot of people on the internet point out, oh, this sounds like Deep Purple, this sounds like Emerson, Lake and Palmer, this sounds like, and I just wanted to show where exactly this video game music's coming from and why video game music is helping transition that music over to younger generations like myself. It's kind of like the gateway, because it was a gateway for me. It got me into classical and metal and all that stuff. Maybe without game music, I wouldn't have gotten into it. So, yeah.
Wow. So have you been always an otaku?
I wouldn't consider myself an otaku because otakus are more about anime and anime culture, and I don't really like anime. I like video games and some anime movies. There's like 2 anime movies I really like, but I don't really watch or follow anime. Okay,
you're still in your 20s, and I know you got a lot of interesting projects that you're planning to do, but so far, can you tell me about your success and challenges of owning a record label in your particular genre?
Yeah, I figured because it was a smaller culture that not many people like yourself knew about, I figured maybe I could have a chance in this because it's not big and mainstream and a lot of competition. And so I reached out to people to help me, to club owners in San Francisco, to record label in Los Angeles. And I said, do you guys want to do something, put on events, get some DJs, and maybe bring the European scene to America? And almost all of them read my messages and ignored it. So I just decided I'm just going to do it then. So I just started doing everything. I did the marketing, the promotion, the literally everything for the first year, the artwork, the interviews. Now I have other people to do all that stuff. But it first started because I asked for help and they all just ignored me.
Wow.
So that's how it started.
I am so proud of you. You just have to keep pushing.
Yeah. And it still happens to this day. The irony is what I've learned while doing this, my biggest lesson and takeaway from being in this scene is it's usually the smaller people go on a club or maybe a blog, but famous people toward the world and play to millions of people, they're the first ones to respond and they're like, help you out. And I'm just like, maybe that's why they're big. That was my biggest takeaway from all this, and I don't know how many years I've been doing it. It's always the more famous people that are so quick to be kind and nice, and smaller people are just more like, I don't want to work with you, and I'm like, well, that's why you're small.
So you're a producer, label owner, and A&R at the same time. So how do all these elements fit into songwriting, and what's the key to collaboration?
I think collaboration is my favorite thing ever about any kind of medium. I can do everything myself, but I think that's boring for me personally. I know others prefer that. I like when someone throws their ideas at me, or I throw my ideas at someone else. And even if it's something I don't like, I always try to use it for another project. So I think collaboration is important because you're always going to get something that you wouldn't have thought of yourself. Because if you keep coming up with the ideas 100% of the time, I think people can start to see the patterns, the similarities, and just say, oh, maybe they're not so diverse as we thought. But if you have someone, especially someone that's out of your genre, like I like hiring singers that have no idea what drum and bass is. And I'm like, you need to sing for me. And they're trained in like opera or jazz. And they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. Those are my favorite songs to do because I think that's what video game music is getting things together, throwing it in a blender, and then you get something that you didn't know existed come out. So that's why I like collaboration, is just finding new visions, new ideas that you yourself probably wouldn't have come up with.
Absolutely. That's a great point. How do you find new artists?
For the most part, I go online and sometimes I just browse aimlessly on websites and find a singer on a song and see if that singer's available. I met my favorite singer from soundbetter.com, and she's famous now. She's touring the world and she's got an album out. There's no specific way. Sometimes I'll hear a song on my phone and be like, who is this? And then just YouTube them and I just start working with them. Yeah, there's no specific way for me. If I hear it and I like it, then I'll work with them if they want to.
Right. Well, you never know because you found me as a translator. Then I just happened to be a singer, so I did one song for you.
You did two for me.
Singing in Japanese, type of song that I never did.
Yeah, those are my favorite singers to work with, is when they're not familiar with what I'm doing, because that way the song comes out sounding, I think it's like a new color in the color palette you didn't know existed. So like one of my favorite songs I did, she's a country singer, so she's never done electronic. And I gave her a 6-minute, really dark, aggressive song. And she's like, I do country. I don't do anything like this. And it ended up being both of our favorite songs. I remixed it a lot of times and a lot of people liked it. So
I hope you enjoyed part 1. Please continue to watch part 2 about songwriting as well. And don't forget to click subscribe and hit the bell to get notified about new videos of Songwriters Room, my new music, or Japanese series. Arigato!